For months, Meghan Markle appeared determined to rebuild her image far beyond the palace walls. But when Piers Morgan returned with a new claim about Hollywood's private rejection of the Duchess, one explosive accusation threatened to destroy the comeback she had carefully constructed. Meghan's new life had been built around one powerful message: she had survived the monarchy, escaped its control, and emerged stronger. In California, she was no longer expected to follow palace schedules, obey ancient traditions, or wait for approval from courtiers who had never truly understood her. She could choose her own projects, shape her own public identity, and speak in her own voice. Every appearance was meant to prove independence. Every announcement was meant to signal influence. Every new business move carried the promise that Meghan had finally taken control of her future. But the freedom came with pressure. The expectations surrounding Meghan and Harry were enormous from the moment they left royal life. Their supporters expected them to become major global figures. Media companies expected compelling stories. Hollywood insiders expected creativity, access, and results. Nothing they did was judged as ordinary. A delayed project became a warning sign. A quiet month became evidence of decline. A failed partnership became another question about whether the Sussexes had overestimated their power. Then, Piers Morgan stepped back into the conflict. He was not simply another television presenter offering criticism from a distance. For Meghan, Morgan represented a long and deeply personal public feud. He had challenged her credibility, attacked her decisions, and repeatedly questioned the story she had told about royal life. He seemed determined to follow every stage of her journey, waiting for weakness, contradiction, or failure. Yet this time, his accusation carried a different kind of threat. Morgan was no longer speaking mainly about Buckingham Palace, royal titles, family arguments, or the bitterness surrounding the Sussex departure. He claimed the real trouble was now unfolding inside Hollywood itself. According to Morgan, powerful executives had begun losing confidence. Producers were becoming cautious. Publicists were keeping their distance. Former supporters were allegedly speaking in private about disappointment, frustration, and professional risk. The suggestion was chilling because it attacked the foundation of Meghan's chosen future. Palace resistance could be blamed on tradition. Royal hostility could be described as fear of change. But if Hollywood was also turning against her, the explanation became far more difficult. Harry understood the danger immediately. Certain calls had gone unanswered. Promising discussions had quietly slowed. People who once sounded enthusiastic had become vague and unavailable. None of those setbacks had seemed fatal on their own, but Morgan's words connected them into a pattern neither Harry nor Meghan wanted to examine. And beneath Meghan's anger was something even more disturbing than another public insult. Morgan appeared to know details that had never been announced. He hinted at private meetings, rejected ideas, and conversations held behind closed doors in Los Angeles. That raised the question neither of them could ignore. Who had spoken? And how much did Morgan truly know? To understand why Morgan's accusation carried such destructive force, the story must return to the promise that brought Meghan and Harry to Hollywood and the expectations that began turning that promise into a trap. Hollywood was supposed to become Meghan's kingdom, without crowns, curtsies, or palace permission. Yet behind the invitations and carefully announced projects, a harsher judgment was forming, one based not on royal titles, but on results, relationships, and whether the Sussex name could still command attention. California had offered Meghan and Harry more than distance from Britain. It offered a second beginning. After years of tension, accusation, and emotional strain, they arrived carrying global sympathy and a story powerful enough to command the attention of almost every major platform. Their departure from royal life had shocked the monarchy, divided the public, and transformed them from working royals into independent figures with complete control over what came next. For Meghan, Hollywood seemed like the place where everything the palace had allegedly resisted could finally become an advantage. Her ambition would no longer be treated as a threat. Her confidence could be celebrated rather than questioned. Her understanding of publicity, storytelling, and cultural influence could open doors that royal protocol had kept firmly closed. She believed independence would allow her to challenge powerful institutions without being punished for refusing to remain silent. At first, the industry appeared ready to reward that belief. Major companies showed interest. Important conversations began. Deals were discussed with expectations far beyond ordinary entertainment. Meghan and Harry were expected to deliver personal revelations, meaningful social campaigns, influential programming, and projects capable of attracting enormous audiences. But Hollywood's welcome came with conditions no public announcement could hide. Access was easy when curiosity was high. Loyalty was different. It depended on deadlines, trust, commercial success, and the ability to keep producing after the excitement faded. Soon, every Sussex project became a public test. A successful release would prove they had escaped the monarchy and built something greater. A disappointment would suggest their influence had depended on the royal institution they had rejected. That pressure began changing the mood around them. Quiet whispers suggested Meghan wanted control over every part of the process: the message, the language, the production, and even the way partners described her publicly. Some admired her determination. Others allegedly viewed it as exhausting. Powerful contacts also became wary of being drawn into endless conflict involving palace officials, hostile newspapers, estranged relatives, and former allies. They had signed up for creativity and influence, not a permanent war with Britain's most famous family. Harry felt the danger before either of them was ready to name it. His instinct was to protect Meghan, as he had during their battles with the press and palace. Yet Hollywood was not the monarchy. There was no single institution to confront, no official enemy to accuse. Doors could simply close. Calls could stop. Invitations could disappear without explanation. And slowly, that was what seemed to happen. Enthusiastic voices became cautious. Meetings were delayed. Private messages went unanswered. Each disappointment appeared isolated, but together they were becoming something far more damaging, a hidden record of retreat waiting for someone to expose it. As the Sussexes struggled to understand whether the silence around them was temporary or deliberate, Piers Morgan began gathering the fragments and preparing to give Hollywood's private doubts a public voice. Morgan did not begin with one dramatic accusation. He began with names that had gone quiet, projects that had stalled, invitations that had disappeared, and executives who allegedly regretted becoming involved. Piece by piece, he constructed a narrative Meghan could not easily dismiss. He returned to the Sussex story with the confidence of someone who believed the real battle had moved beyond palace gates. Buckingham Palace, he suggested, was no longer the center of Meghan's crisis. The greater danger was unfolding in the world she had chosen for herself: the studios, agencies, private clubs, production offices, and powerful social circles of Hollywood. Morgan spoke of unnamed producers, celebrity representatives, media executives, and former supporters who allegedly viewed the Sussex brand as increasingly difficult to understand. Was it built around entertainment, activism, personal testimony, or permanent conflict with the monarchy? According to his argument, that uncertainty had become a risk. Hollywood had first welcomed Meghan because she carried royal access, emotional controversy, and a story unlike anything the industry had seen. But once the revelations began repeating familiar wounds, curiosity allegedly started to fade. Executives, Morgan claimed, wanted new ideas. They wanted strong programs, clear direction, and projects capable of surviving without another royal confession. Yet he suggested Meghan remain deeply focused on defending her image, correcting criticism, and controlling how every part of her story was presented. Then the allegations became more personal. Morgan implied that certain celebrities had quietly stepped back because they feared private conversations might one day appear in an interview, documentary, memoir, or public dispute. Others were allegedly frustrated by delays, shifting expectations, layers of approval, and the constant concern that any creative decision might damage Meghan's carefully guarded reputation. He did not rush the attack. He tightened it. Professional doubts became questions of trust. Missed opportunities became evidence of retreat. Cautious friends became former allies. Morgan was no longer suggesting that Meghan had simply disappointed a few executives. He was hinting that she had lost the confidence of people she still believed were standing beside her. Harry watched the clips with growing concern. At first, Morgan's words sounded like familiar hostility. But then came details that felt too close to private discussions within their own team. Phrases resembled internal arguments. References matched meetings that had never been announced. Meghan initially dismissed it as another act of obsession from a man who had built years of attention around attacking her. But her certainty weakened when Morgan mentioned a recent Hollywood rejection that had remained completely private. That changed everything. Someone knew. Someone had spoken. And the leak appeared to come from far closer than either Meghan or Harry wanted to believe. Yet Morgan still seemed to be holding something back, saving his most dangerous allegation until the tension had reached its breaking point. Then Morgan abandoned vague warnings and delivered the allegation that transformed a familiar media feud into a personal and professional emergency for Meghan. The revelation came without warning. Morgan claimed that a powerful group of Hollywood decision-makers had quietly turned against Meghan, viewing her as commercially unpredictable, personally demanding, and increasingly dependent on royal controversy. But one alleged private rejection made the accusation impossible for her to ignore. According to Morgan, this was not a public boycott announced through headlines or official statements. It was quieter than that, more controlled, more dangerous. Executives did not need to criticize Meghan openly. They could simply delay meetings, stop returning calls, withdraw invitations, and allow once promising opportunities to disappear without explanation. Morgan described it as an unofficial retreat spreading through the industry. Producers who had once shown enthusiasm were allegedly becoming cautious. Influential contacts were keeping their distance. Major decision-makers were said to be questioning whether the Sussex name still carried enough power to justify the attention, cost, and controversy surrounding it. Then came the claim that struck directly at Meghan's future. Morgan alleged that a high-profile production opportunity had recently collapsed after senior figures raised one brutal question. Could Meghan attract audiences without returning to royal grievances? The project had supposedly been designed as proof that she could move beyond palace conflict and establish herself as a creative force in her own right. Yet behind closed doors, doubts had reportedly grown over whether the public remained interested when the monarchy was no longer at the center of the story. But Morgan did not stop there. He suggested that one influential Hollywood figure who had once encouraged Meghan's ambitions had privately warned others that working with her involved intense demands, endless concern over reputation, and the risk of being pulled into public controversy. The accusation was deeply personal. It suggested betrayal from someone Meghan may have trusted. Morgan also claimed that celebrities who publicly supported the Sussexes after their royal departure had begun changing their views in private. Some allegedly believed the conflict surrounding Meghan and Harry had become exhausting. Others feared that even a casual association could drag them into another dispute involving the palace, the press, former friends, or estranged relatives. Then Morgan delivered his harshest interpretation. Meghan, he argued, wanted the authority of a powerful producer, the protection given to a royal figure, and the sympathy offered to an outsider, all at the same time. For Meghan, The emotional cruelty of that claim was impossible to miss. Hollywood had been meant to prove that she never needed palace acceptance. Now Morgan was claiming she was losing acceptance from the world she had chosen instead. What frightened Harry most was the detail. Morgan appeared to know about a private meeting in which Meghan's future media strategy had been questioned by people once described as loyal supporters. The language sounded familiar. The concerns matched conversations held inside their professional circle. Meghan denied everything immediately. Then, the calls began. Advisors were contacted. Former partners were questioned. Messages were sent asking who had spoken and what had been shared. One person, however, did not answer. A former ally who had once responded quickly had suddenly gone silent. The backlash itself was damaging. But what happened after the broadcast revealed something even more dangerous. Meghan no longer knew which enemy was outside her circle, and which one might already be inside it. Behind the controlled statements and public silence, Meghan allegedly erupted. Phones were called, loyalties were questioned, and years of frustration with the palace, the press, and Hollywood collided at once. This was not simply anger at Morgan, it was terror that her entire reinvention was collapsing. The reaction was said to be immediate. What began as disbelief quickly became something far more intense, a breaking point shaped by years of pressure, suspicion, and the constant need to defend every decision. Meghan was not only asking why Morgan had attacked her again, she wanted to know how he had obtained details linked to confidential meetings, rejected concepts, strained professional relationships, and private fears about projects that had not yet been announced. Those questions soon turned toward the people around her. Members of the wider team were allegedly challenged over what they knew, what they had missed, and why no one had recognized that Morgan was building a larger case. Meghan believed her advisors should have protected the strategy, controlled the damage, and identified warning signs before the accusations reached the public. Instead, she now faced the possibility that someone trusted had allowed private concerns to become weapons. The silence from Hollywood made everything worse. Calls that were not returned and messages left unanswered could now be interpreted as confirmation. Every cautious executive, distant friend, and absent supporter risked becoming part of Morgan's story, even if none had publicly agreed with him. Harry attempted to calm the situation, but his patience was also beginning to fracture. Once again, a professional setback had become a battle involving media enemies, royal wounds, and the choices they had made after leaving Britain. He understood Meghan's anger, yet he feared that an immediate response would give Morgan exactly what he wanted, a larger audience and another cycle of confrontation. That fear produced a painful clash. Meghan allegedly wanted a forceful denial before the allegations hardened into accepted truth. Harry urged caution. To Meghan, hesitation felt dangerously close to surrender. To Harry, retaliation risked turning private doubts into a global spectacle. Beneath the argument was a deeper wound. Meghan had left Britain believing she was escaping judgment from an institution that would never accept her. Now she felt judged again by the same Hollywood figures who had once appeared eager to welcome her. Worse, she believed the palace would quietly benefit from every failure. It did not need to create the backlash. It only needed to watch as critics declared the Sussex departure a disastrous mistake. Old betrayals returned all at once, broken friendships, fractured family ties, hostile briefings, relentless headlines, and promises of protection that vanished when pressure became unbearable. Yet her deepest anger may not have been aimed at Morgan. It was directed toward the former ally whose alleged warning could have encouraged others to step away. Before any public statement could be released, Meghan demanded one answer: who had spoken? As Meghan searched for the person who had spoken, Harry faced a darker realization. Stopping the leak might be easier than repairing the damage it had revealed between them. Harry had defended Meghan against the palace, the press, and members of his own family. But this crisis demanded something different. To protect her now, he would have to confront questions he had avoided for years, questions about their strategy, their isolation, and the price of permanent war. His first instinct was the same one that had guided so many of his choices: defend Meghan before the story grew beyond control. Harry had spent years believing that silence could become a weapon in the hands of hostile newspapers, palace insiders, and commentators determined to shape the public's judgment. Memories of Princess Diana had taught him that waiting for fairness could be dangerous. Once a narrative hardened, truth often arrived too late. Yet attacking Morgan immediately carried its own risk. A forceful response might not silence the accusations. It could make them larger, inviting more questions about the Hollywood rejection Morgan claimed had already begun. Harry understood that every denial would be examined, every word challenged, and every missing detail treated as evidence. For the first time, he reportedly asked a question that cut deeper than the leak itself. Had their strategy become too focused on answering enemies and not focused enough on building something strong enough to outlast them? Meghan heard doubt where Harry believed he was offering caution. His hesitation felt like a withdrawal of support at the exact moment she needed complete loyalty. Their disagreement quickly became personal. Meghan had left royal life, endured public attacks, lost relationships, and carried the blame for a rupture that involved them both. Harry had abandoned his official role, strained ties with his family, and entered a world where his title still opened doors but also followed him like a shadow. Each believed the other had forgotten the full cost of those sacrifices. Harry now felt caught between places that offered no true belonging. Britain seemed hostile. Hollywood felt conditional. The royal identity he once wanted to escape remained the reason much of the world still watched him. He wanted silence, distance, and time to rebuild privately. Meghan believed silence would allow Morgan, the palace, and every critic to define her future without resistance. As suspicion spread, Harry began questioning former advisors, media partners, social contacts, and people once welcomed into their confidence. But an even more disturbing possibility emerged. There may not have been one betrayer. The details could have come from several frustrated people sharing similar experiences until separate complaints formed one damaging account. That possibility made the crisis harder to contain. Harry also feared that Meghan's private reaction could become the next leak, turning a moment of fear and anger into another humiliating headline. Behind everything stood the unresolved weight of their departure, damaged family ties, financial pressure, old resentment, and the belief that Hollywood's success would prove their decision had been worth the pain. Then, Harry received a message. The backlash, it warned, might extend beyond one lost opportunity. An upcoming Sussex project was now at risk. That message changed the stakes once again. Because the crisis was no longer only about reputation, it now threatened the project Meghan believed could restore her authority. Meghan's next project was supposed to silence her critics and prove she could succeed without royal scandal. Instead, Morgan's claims placed every partner, investor, and celebrity supporter under suspicion. Before the project could even launch, fear began spreading through the people meant to support it. The project had been designed as a professional reset. It was meant to move Meghan beyond palace conflict and present her as something larger than a former royal at war with the institution she had left behind. This was her chance to claim creative authority, shape a new cultural identity, and prove that her influence did not depend on another family revelation. That made the stakes enormous. Success would validate the Sussex decision to walk away from royal duties. It would show that the pain, the broken relationships, and the years of public conflict had led somewhere meaningful. Failure would do the opposite. It would hand their critics a brutal argument, that the attention surrounding Meghan and Harry had always depended on the monarchy they rejected. Morgan's allegations now threatened to consume the launch before audiences could judge the work itself. Partners feared every interview would become an interrogation about Hollywood backlash, private complaints, and missing allies. Instead of discussing the project, Meghan might spend the entire campaign defending her reputation. Advisors allegedly urged caution. Reduce visibility. Avoid attacking Morgan. Repair strained relationships privately. Allow the controversy to lose momentum before making another major move. Meghan refused. A delay, she believed, would look like surrender. It would suggest that Morgan had exposed something real and that Hollywood no longer trusted her. She insisted the launch move forward, even as uncertainty spread through the people attached to it. Then came another setback. A celebrity supporter expected to take part in a promotional appearance withdrew, blaming scheduling difficulties. The explanation sounded harmless, but the timing was devastating. To Meghan, it looked like proof of a coordinated retreat. To others, her growing suspicion risked making already nervous partners feel accused. Inside the team, a deeper argument began. Should Meghan once again present herself as the target of powerful institutions determined to silence her? Or had the time come to abandon grievance-driven storytelling and allow the work to stand alone? Harry feared the project had become far more than a launch. It was now a referendum on their marriage, their finances, their credibility, and the decision that had separated him from the royal family. If it failed, the damage would not remain professional. Morgan increased the pressure by publicly predicting that Meghan's comeback would collapse unless she confronted the real reason Hollywood figures were allegedly stepping away. That challenge pushed her toward the most dangerous choice available. Rather than retreat, Meghan began preparing a direct response. She wanted to expose the backlash, identify those she believed had betrayed her, and prove that the campaign against her was deliberate. But confronting Hollywood would require Meghan to reveal names, motives, and private conversations, and doing so risked proving the very accusations she was desperate to defeat. Meghan now faces a choice more dangerous than anything she encountered inside the palace: rebuild quietly and accept temporary humiliation, or retaliate publicly and risk losing the last allies still standing beside her. Either path could define the rest of her life. Every pressure surrounding her had now collided. Morgan's public attack had given Hollywood's alleged retreat a name. Harry was urging caution. The royal family remained a silent shadow behind every professional setback, while Meghan's old fear of being controlled returned with brutal force. To remain silent felt unbearable. Yet speaking could destroy what little trust remained. Meghan believed retreat would allow Morgan to claim victory. Critics would portray her as rejected, exposed, and professionally finished. Every delayed project would become proof. Every absent celebrity would look like confirmation. Silence, in her experience, had rarely remained empty. The palace had once filled it with briefings, speculation, and carefully protected reputations. The press had filled it with accusation. Why should Hollywood be any different? But retaliation carried an even greater danger. Naming alleged betrayers or challenging powerful industry figures could frighten future partners. Anyone considering a collaboration might fear that a disagreement, private concern, or failed project could later become part of another public battle. Harry offered a quieter path: fewer interviews, stronger boundaries, consistent work, no immediate attack on Morgan, and less dependence on royal controversy. He believed their future could only be repaired by creating something solid enough to survive criticism. Meghan questioned whether such patience was realistic. Quiet rebuilding required trust, and trust was exactly what had collapsed. Then came the possibility she resisted most. Perhaps there was no single leak, no hidden mastermind, no former ally secretly directing the backlash. The information may have emerged from several disappointed people comparing similar experiences until separate doubts became one shared judgment. That possibility was emotionally devastating because it offered no clear enemy to defeat. There would be no dramatic confrontation capable of restoring control, only a slow breakdown of confidence across an entire professional network. Morgan continued provoking her, appearing to wait for the furious response that would extend the controversy and support his claim that Meghan could not tolerate criticism. For once, she refused to give it to him. No immediate statement came. No names were released. Instead, Meghan began preparing a tightly controlled public return meant to prove that she still possessed influence, discipline, and the ability to command attention on her own terms. Whether that silence represented strength, defeat, or the calm before a more explosive counterattack remained impossible to know. Meghan had escaped the monarchy's forbidden traditions and hidden hierarchies, only to discover that Hollywood maintained its own private punishments, and its doors could close without a single word. And as Meghan prepares her next move, one question remains unanswered. Did Piers Morgan merely expose Hollywood's backlash, or did his attack help turn quiet industry doubts into a crisis that could permanently reshape the Sussex future?